Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the things that need to either change or be added into Warcraft Rumble based on, only playing for a few weeks. It's something I would like to mention. The devs will be working on things. They've announced stuff that they announced at BlizzCon that we've got coming up with like replays and raids. But these are some of the things I do think we need to see some sort of discussion on sooner rather than later overall. So let's get into the first one. It's going to be deck lists, which is something I know a lot of people have talked about. And overall, as anyone who's played Rumble will know, it's a bit of a pain to say, okay, well, here's my PvP list for, say, Cairn, and now I want to do some heroics. Okay, well, now I have to change these units out, I have to swap these around, and then you want to go PvP again, then you have to swap them back, or even the difference between heroics, normal PvE, dungeons, things like that. I think it's really just an annoyance for the player, and I think at a bare minimum it would be amazing if we could get at least PvP and PvE versions for each character. So I have a PvE can build and I have a PvP can build, so at least then you can say, well, all my stuff for PvP is over here, that's not going to change unless I want to specifically change it, and then all my PvE stuff, even if you have to change, a mini or two for like specific heroics or things, it's not that bad. But just knowing that you can actually store your PvP builds, because right now, pretty much all my heroes are in PvP mode, let's say, but I need to push heroics again. So I'm going to have to start changing at least one hero from each faction, and it's just a lot of time wasting that I don't think we need, and it would allow us to experiment more without, losing things if they added actual more, say, deck slots, if that's what we want to call them. So that would be really, really nice overall, and I think a feature that everyone wants, and again, fingers crossed sooner rather than later. And next one, as a couple of these will be, if any of you watch me and know me very well, is another PvP one, and it's one more rating split. So if we look, sorry, wrong one. If we look here, you can see that below 1,000 rating, level caps at 1, below 2,000 it's at 3, below 3,000 it's at 5. And I understand why they would want to do this. I believe it was only originally capped at 1 for 1,000. Then there was a patch right before launch where they added 3 and 5, which I think is fantastic. But I really wish, just where I'm sort of seeing it right now, is there would be one more, which would be below 4,000, would be capped at 7. Because if you actually look at the ranks, right, as you can see, I'm 3,000 on 3 heroes, more or less, so I'm 9,000. If I play any of these heroes, I am in the uncapped zone where it can get very spicy, where you can face people at level 8s and 9s if I only have level 6s or maybe 7s, and things can really stack. I think really if you face 9s or 10s and you're in level, say, 6s or 7s, you're in trouble. You are probably going to just lose, and there's not a lot you can do about it. So the spikiness of matchups feels way more level dependent than it is on skill. So I'd like to see one more to just try and bridge the gap between what I would call early game, which would be up to that level 7 cap, and then late game PvP, which is, at the moment where most of the whales reside, let's say, if they're good enough. So if you look here, I'm at Platinum Prodigy 1, and this is basically, let's say, capped at the 3k mark, right? Just over 9,000. But if you actually look at how many more ranks there are beyond where I am at right now, there's a lot. There's the rest of Platinum, there's Dark Irons, there's then Mithril, True Silver, Thorium, Elementium, Arcanite, and Mastermind. It goes up to 20,000 rating, so it's over double the honor that I currently have at that capped amount, which is the 3,000 each, roughly, again. Whereas if there was just 4,000, you would still only go up to 12k honor or rating or whatever you want to call it. And those would still be capped at 7. So if you have minis that, say, are level 18s, then they would be capped, they would be 6 in PvP, right? Because it's divided by 3, if I can do the maths correct. So it still requires you to be higher level, be later progressed in your account or in the game, but it just doesn't, it's not just like, you're doing fine, and then you open the doors and all hell breaks loose, which is what it feels like right now. It would just be that one more step that I think would add a lot, and help a lot of people out, honestly, because I want to PvP more, but from what I have played past 3k, it genuinely feels like you're rolling a dice. Am I going to run into someone who has minis that are 2 levels higher than mine, which is actually a lot more levels in the actual game because everything's divided by 3? Or am I going to run into someone, which has happened, where people have 1 or 2 levels below mine, and then I dumpster them, right? And that's like no real fun for anyone, I don't think, or maybe for the people who win, I suppose, if you like that. But I prefer something a bit more balanced. Another point, as we keep talking about PvP, and I think this would be so great to add, and I'm sure they've thought about this, but is an unranked mode, right? Because I now just can't experiment with Cairn builds or Baron builds or whoever. It doesn't actually matter what character or what rating you're on. But if you want to hold that rating and, let's say try hard, you can't experiment. Like, I can't play Rend in PvP with maybe trying out some new builds unless I want to risk my rating. And I'm sure there are some people that think, oh, well, yeah, that's what you should have to do, risk your rating to play the game. But I do think just an unranked mode to test stuff out, it would be useful for me to like make some cool builds and show you guys. But at the moment, with these 3 characters at least, it's hard to experiment. And soon, because I am aiming to get every hero on 3k at least, soon it'll be difficult to say like, oh, well, I have to just pick heroes I maybe don't care about to sort of experiment with, but then you're limited. And I just think it would ease some of this pressure if players could play an unranked mode, because they still get to have the fun of PvP, but without that sort of heavy restricted level cap issues. And it probably goes without saying here, but I will say it, the unranked mode would have a reasonably low, maybe even just a level 1 cap, right, for everyone. Because obviously if you have unranked and then people have like level 10 minis and you have level 2 minis, that's not going to be any fun, or it's going to be a complete waste of time, actually. So yeah, I would love an unranked queue. I think that would add a lot to the game as well, and just give people more things to do, because as I said, right now, it feels hard to experiment without dumpstering your rank, potentially, so that kind of sucks. Maybe the final one, let me just look at my list. Yeah, okay, I think this is it. My final one, very PvP-focused discussion, I guess, would be a bounce patch. Honestly, I'm very interested to hear from the devs or the balance team or whoever to see what they think of the state of PvP right now, or of the game in general, because PvE balance is a weird one, because they can tweak boss numbers, or they can tweak what the bosses spawn, how often, they choose what minis they have, blah, blah, blah. They can tweak things like that, which is fairly easy. But for me, I have a couple of gripes in PvP right now. Whether you guys agree with me or not, maybe you can let me know in the comments. But one of my issues in PvP is this guy. Can I open the list? Baron Rivendare, especially with Chiller the Grave, just feels very oppressive, right? It's like, it was the easiest climb to 3k I've done on any of the characters, because you just play Baron and just do stuff. Maybe this is a fault of the current map, but I do think the strength of the Skeletal Mages, with just the auto summoning, like having more value than your opponent, is 90% of the battle in PvP, because the whole point is you are generally sort of running circles around each other, a bit of cat and mouse in terms of who gets the most value out of units or minis. And when you are summoning Skeletal Mages that have frost attacks that slow melee, well, slow everything, but melee is most important, they deal good damage. They deal good damage to towers. They auto spawn quite often, and they take a few hits as well. And I've discussed this with a fair few people, a lot of viewers, on how Baron could or should be nerfed. For me, I just think, whether we agree that normal skeletons, one with the swords, are fine or not, I think reducing the spawn time, or increasing the spawn time, I guess, make you spawn less skeletons automatically, and maybe that could only be attached to Chill of the Grave specifically, so you spawn better minions, but they spawn less often. I think that is a reasonable trade-off. The other one is to actually make the Skeletal Mages have like 1 health. So they are strong, they provide range damage, they slow, which is very impactful, especially against melee and potentially against air as well. But a light breeze knocks them down. Like, any form of damage, they fall over to. I think that would also be a good suggestion. But I think the Baron just very passively but aggressively just pushing constantly, the second they outvalue you and get hold of those resource nodes, the chests or the mines or whatever, it starts to just snowball, because they're just simply having more minis than you overall on the board, and they're also powerful. Like, that's the big thing. So I think Baron specifically, out of all of the leaders for me, is one that needs looking at in terms of nerfing. Buffing, that's a whole separate video. The other thing, if I probably switch to, where should we switch to? I mean, this is as good an example, right? I believe this is like the highest, or was the other day, the highest rated Ren build. And a lot of PvP builds look like this right now. And it's the low cost minis. And not only that, but combined with Unbound. For me personally, again, people by all means disagree. I am not a huge fan of Unbound being almost unlimited, right? The Unbound mechanic, I completely get the ability to have a mini drop somewhere, almost anywhere on the map, let's say, is cool, right? It's like a special maneuver, something up your sleeve that you can say, well, actually, I can play this here for a sneak attack or, backdoor in the base or something like that. I'm okay with that as an idea. But the problem is, so many decks that are top tier in PvP just spam Unbound, right? Because it's too flexible, right? We know Safe Pilot's overtuned. Quillbore is a fine unit, but again with eggs as well, and then you see Dark Iron or maybe some other Unbound units, depending on who you're playing, like the Skeletons and things like that. The problem is, one Unbound mini, fine, that's no problem. It's like a trick you can do. But when so many decks are just like, yeah, half the deck's going to be Unbound. I think there are only 8 Unbound minis in the game, and most decks have them, which is crazy. As in, not half of the decks, but half of your slots, right? Because you don't count the leader. But here, 3 Unbound. I think most good PvP builds run at least 3. And you can argue that the minis themselves are too strong, which sure, Safe Pilot, yeah, eggs, sure, Quillbot, sure, and some of the others as well. But for me, my worry is Unbound just feels too strong overall as a mechanic that you can spam. Now, my idea, which might be a bit heavy-handed, is decks should only be allowed 1 Unbound mini, and then they can just put a caveat in, like Maev can have an ability that lets you run like 3, let's say. So, like, Maev is the Unbound spam character. That's fine. But in general, I think if you could only run 1, maybe 2, they could try it, whatever, then you would have to make a choice. If these Unbound, this mechanic or minis are going to be so powerful, I think you should have to pick which one. Do you want the tanky Quillbore? Do you want the eggs to sort of do set plays of either blowing up on enemy minis or protecting certain locations? Or do you want the flexibility of Safe Pilot, or the extra, resource potential of Dark Iron, for example, or whatever the Unbound mini is? I think that would be a more interesting choice and would feel like the game revolves more around pushing the locations or lanes from your base, setting up plays, setting up timings. Because at the moment, a lot of my PvP fights are just, I'll play this, okay, they Safe Pilot, okay, so I Safe Pilot, then they eggs, and then I play. And it's just people just dropping minis all over the map all the time. And again, my opinion, of course, my video, my words, but I just don't really like that. I just don't really like that so much of a battle is just throwing minis wherever. I like the whole, you have to set timings up, work out when you play your minis, where you play, work out how long they're going to walk. Maybe they meet up if you play them in 2 different lanes. You can time it so they join into like a death ball. Things like that I think are really interesting, and I think too much Unbound takes away from that. So just my opinion on Unbound. Hopefully they do it, but overall, just very interested in what a balance patch would look like, mainly for PvP, and also if they just balance PvP separately, because I don't know if they have the ability to do that, but it would be interesting if they did, so they could say, actually, all these stats, let's say PvE is perfectly balanced right now, but PvP isn't. All the stats for PvE are the same, but in PvP, eggs blow up and do 30% less damage than they do now, right? And things like that. Maybe they could go that way, maybe not, we'll see. But overall, I'm just very interested to see when we get a balance patch, / if, I'm sure we will, and what that looks like what the devs' approach to balance looks like. Is it quite aggressive? Is it really small? Like, what if they say, oh, Baron was played the most, so we'll nerf it a little bit to try and bring it down, but everything else seems okay, right? It'll be very interesting to see. Now, non-PvP ones, we'll get there. I think this is a complaint I've heard 1 million times already. It is an issue that only really arises in your first month or so of playing the game, which is not having access to leaders. So, for example, until the BlackRock week, last week I think it was, I had 0 BlackRock champions because I just didn't get them. Right, I had champions for all the, or leaders should I say, for all the other families, but 0 BlackRock. And then this week, which is undead, depending on when you're watching this video, I only just got Thanos because I just didn't have him, didn't get offered. So I do think in your sigil ladder, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, when you get offered a leader choice, I really do think the game should always try to offer you a leader that you don't have, at least one. And I think that's should just be fixed going forward. I actually believe this is an oversight from the devs, because there's no real reason for this to currently exist in its form, where you just can't get a leader if it's not that weak. So then you have to just potentially miss out on completing heroics, for example. Like if you look here, to actually complete the heroic for a bot, you need to do it on every single, with at least one leader from each faction. And it's just an oversight, because once you've played for 5 weeks, let's say, or 4-5 weeks, all the families will have rotated once, and it's pretty easy to get the leaders when you're in that week. Like, I got Thanos pretty easily. So once you've played for 5 weeks, this problem sort of goes away, because then you'll have at least one leader for each faction, so you can do heroics or clear heroics, and you'll have other options as well. For even, for example, I had people in my guild say, oh, well, I don't have any BlackRock or I don't have any beasts, so I just can't help unlock the tomes for the guild. And yeah, that's kind of dumb, but it's only done for like 5 weeks. So I believe it's just an oversight from the devs. So it would be nice in future if they made, mainly for new players, right, the leader choice offers you, it could offer you 2 leaders you already have for level ups, but then at least 1 leader you don't have. So then you can say, well, if I keep playing and doing these sigils, I will get the leaders. Because, like I said, it's not like it's super hard to get them, it's just when you get them. And locking people out of content for silly reasons isn't good. So hopefully they add that. Speaking, or I guess touching on guilds, there's a lot of discussion about, 15 people in a guild isn't enough, right? And on one hand, I agree. On the other hand, if they increased it, which I think I did speak to them at BlizzCon, I spoke to a couple of people actually, and they did say that they're keeping an eye on guild numbers, and you know they're willing potentially to change them up if needed. But I think 15's fine, because if they make them bigger, there'll be an optimal amount of people, right? So if they make them 25, then should you just have to have 25 people to deal with this as much as possible? Maybe not, who knows? But for me, one thing I would like is alliances, which is kind of a suggestion I've heard before and something I've talked about a lot, where instead of increasing the guild numbers, I would actually really like there to be an alliance, which is like an umbrella with, let's say, the number doesn't overly matter, but let's say 4 to 6 guilds can be in an alliance. They have a separate shared chat, so you can talk to people from other guilds. And then, for example, when you look here and you can like sort by, who has the most level, who has the most honor or PvP rating, whatever you want to call it, and so on. You can do this, but it would actually compare the guilds within that alliance. So, this guild's doing the best on PvP, we've got to beat them, or this guild's doing the best on that. And you could even get rewards and stuff based on this, and you can view like little ladders or leaderboards of the guilds within the alliance. And I think that would alleviate a lot of the problems, because for me, if they increased it to 20 still wouldn't be enough, because I have people asking me all the time, can I join your guild? Can I join your guild? If they increased it to 25, we would get 25, right? So I'm wondering if actually just adding more guilds and then creating like an alliance umbrella would actually be a better way to do it, so that guilds and people can still talk and socialize, and you can still then add extra benefits without having to say, well, now 50 people can be in a guild. We have to rebalance all of these rewards. We have to redo the numbers. We have to change the rewards and things like that. I think for now, they could do that and maybe add a few more rewards on, because now we've got, 20 days left, and my guild, who aren't exactly like giga hardcore, have completed this. So maybe they can add some extra additional rewards like weeklies or something. But still, anyway, that was my idea for guilds overall. So yeah, that's the main stuff off the top of my head. I'm sure there are extras. You can let me know in the comments if you have any good ideas for things they can add to or change in the game. And maybe we'll make another video and discuss them. But that's going to be it for today, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.